The crystalline halls of the Galactic Council Station hummed with the low-frequency vibrations of 1,000 different species, each contributing their unique biochemical signatures to the complex atmosphere. Captain James Reed stood rigidly, at attention, his midnight blue uniform pristine despite the 3-month journey from Earth. Behind him, Commander Lisa Park and Lieutenant Tom Hayes flanked the diplomatic envoy, their faces masks of professional composure that barely concealed their mounting frustration. The council chamber stretched before them like a cathedral of alien arrogance, its domed ceiling reaching toward infinity while holographic displays cast shifting patterns of light across the assembled delegates. Each species represented here had earned their place through millennia of technological advancement, cultural sophistication, and most importantly proven military might. The application of the species designation human from the third planet of the Sol system has been reviewed, announced the towering Nexari representative, its multiple eyes regarding the human delegation with barely concealed disdain. The Council finds your civilization ... lacking in the fundamental qualities required for membership. Reed's jaw tightened imperceptibly. 3 months of preparation, countless diplomatic briefings, and humanity's greatest technological achievements reduced to a single dismissive sentence. The holographic displays around the chamber flickered with data streams, human scientific discoveries, architectural marvels, artistic achievements, all seemingly irrelevant to these self-appointed arbiters of galactic civilization. On what grounds? Reed asked, his voice carrying the weight of 6 billion souls across the vast chamber. The Kethran delegate's serpentine form undulated, with what might have been amusement. Your species exhibits primitive aggressive tendencies. Your history is marked by constant warfare, territorial disputes, and an alarming propensity for violence. You have not transcended your base nature. Furthermore, added the insectoid Zephyrian representative, mandibles clicking with mechanical precision, your technology remains crude and inefficient. Your weapon systems rely on primitive plasma discharge mechanisms. Your defensive capabilities are centuries behind current galactic standards. Reed felt the familiar fire building in his chest, the same righteous anger that had driven him through the academy, through the border wars, through every impossible mission command had thrown at him. These beings, for all their technological superiority and cultural refinement, had never faced the kind of adversity that forged human character. They had never known the desperate creativity that emerged when survival hung by a thread. Your application is denied, the Nexari continued, its tone suggesting the matter was already forgotten. Perhaps in several millennia, when your species has evolved beyond its current limitations, you may reapply. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Sci-fi stellar conflict is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you're hungry for HFY battles and tales of human valor against alien might, hit subscribe, it's free, and it helps us bring these front lines to you. The dismissal was swift and efficient, as cold and calculated as everything else about these beings. Reed watched the delegates begin to disperse, their attention already shifting to matters they deemed more worthy of consideration. The casual dismissal of humanity's potential stung more than any direct insult could have done as they walked through the station's corridors toward their docking bay. Hayes finally broke the silence. Captain, with respect, those arrogant bastards have no idea what they just did. Reed paused at a viewport overlooking the vast expanse of space, watching the massive Vorthek dreadnought that had been shadowing their diplomatic mission since they'd entered Council space. Its dark hull bristled with weapon systems that could reduce the U.E.'s Defiance to scattered atoms in seconds. They think they know us, Reed said quietly, his reflection ghost-like in the transparisteel. They see our history, our conflicts, our weapons, and they think they understand what humanity is capable of. They see warfare and call it primitive. They see struggle and call it weakness. Park moved to stand beside him, her expression thoughtful. What do you see, Captain? Reed's smile was sharp as a blade. I see a species that has never had to fight for anything. Never had to adapt or die. Never had to look impossible odds in the face and find a way to win anyway. He turned from the viewport, his eyes hard with determination. They think our plasma weapons are crude, our tactics primitive, our nature base Let them think that. Let them believe their technology makes them superior. The used Defiance waited in its docking bay, her hull scarred from countless battles but her plasma banks fully charged, and her crew ready for whatever came next. She was humanity's answer to the galaxy's arrogance, not the most advanced ship, not the most elegant, but crewed by beings who had spent their entire evolutionary history proving that the strongest, the smartest, and the most technologically advanced didn't always win. Reed keyed his comm unit as they approached the airlock. "All hands, this is the captain. We're going home. And we're going to show these aliens exactly what they just dismissed." The die was cast, though none of them knew it yet. In the shadows of the galaxy, forces were already moving that would test every assumption the Council had made about humanity's place in the cosmic order. The first sign of trouble came as static across the quantum communication networks, a harsh, alien voice cutting through the diplomatic channels like a blade through silk. Admiral Sarah Chun stood in the command center of Luna Station, watching. The holographic display updated in real time as red indicators blossomed across human space like drops of blood on a pristine map. "Attention, primitive species of Sol system." The transmission crackled, its mechanical translation unable to fully capture the contempt in the alien voice. "I am Fleet Commander Thek of the Vorthik Empire. Your pathetic civilization has been deemed unworthy of continued existence. Submit now, and your deaths will be swift." The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of life support systems and the soft beeping of incoming distress signals. Chun watched the tactical display with growing horror as ship after ship winked out of existence, their transponder signals dying abruptly as the Vorthak fleet swept through the outer colonies with ruthless efficiency. "New Eden colony gone," reported Lieutenant Commander Mark Stone, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. 17,000 civilians. The defensive platforms lasted less than 4 minutes. Chun closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of command settle on her shoulders like a lead blanket. She had served in the border wars, had seen her share of death and destruction, but nothing had prepared her for this. The Vorthik were not raiders or pirates, they were exterminators. Systematic and thorough in their approach to human annihilation. "What about the Kepler defense grid?" she asked, though she already knew the answer from the expression on Stone's face. "Offline. The Vorthik weapons. Admiral, they're not just destroying our installations, they're vaporizing them. Complete. Molecular disintegration. Our defensive positions are gone so fast they don't even have time to transmit damage reports." The holographic display showed the inexorable advance of the Vorthik, fleet massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed humanity's largest battleships, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that operated on principles human science barely understood. Each ship was a masterpiece of alien engineering, elegant and deadly in ways that made human vessels look like crude welding projects by comparison. "Captain Reed's message from the Galactic Council," Stone continued, his voice carefully neutral. "He reports that the Council has declined to intervene. They consider this a natural selection process for primitive species." Chun felt the familiar fire building in her chest, the same righteous anger that had driven her through 30 years of military service. The Council's casual dismissal of human suffering revealed the true nature of their vaunted civilization. For all their technological advancement and cultural refinement, they were nothing more than cosmic vultures, content to watch lesser species tear each other apart. "How many ships can we muster?" she asked, turning to face her staff. 47 vessels of frigate class or higher, Stone replied. "The Vorthak have deployed over 300 ships, including 16 dreadnoughts." "Admiral, the technological disparity is ... significant," Chun nodded grimly. The numbers were stark and unforgiving. Humanity's plasma weapons, for all their devastating power, were generations behind Vorthik technology. Their shields could barely withstand a single focused blast from the alien energy weapons. Their hulls, tough as they were, offered little protection against weapons that could disintegrate matter at the molecular level. "What about Reed's task force?" she asked. "The Defiance and her escort group are 3 days out from the nearest combat zone. Even at maximum burn, they won't arrive until after the Vorthik reach the inner system." The tactical display updated again, showing the alien fleet's projected course. They were moving with methodical precision, eliminating each human outpost and colony in sequence. No survivors, no prisoners, no mercy. The Vorthek had concluded that humanity was unworthy of existence, and they were implementing that judgment with mechanical efficiency. "Admiral," Stone said quietly, "the Joint Chiefs are recommending immediate evacuation of the core worlds. If we can save even a fraction of the civilian population." "No." Chun's voice cut through the suggestion like a blade. "We don't run. We don't hide. We fight." "Admiral, with respect, the odds don't matter," Chun interrupted, her eyes blazing with the fire that had carried her through countless battles. "The Vorthek think they know us. They see our technology and call it primitive. They see our tactics and call them crude. They see our determination and call it stubborn stupidity." She turned to face the holographic display, watching the red indicators continue their relentless advance toward Earth. Somewhere out there, the Vorthek fleet was reducing human achievements to dust and ash, erasing millennia of progress with casual efficiency. But they had made one critical error in their calculations. "They think warfare is about technology," Chun continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "They think victory goes to the most advanced, the most sophisticated, the most elegant. They've never faced a species that learned to fight with rocks and sticks, that carved civilization out of a hostile universe through sheer bloody-minded determination." The bridge crew straightened unconsciously, responding to the steel in their Admiral's voice. These were men and women who had served in the border wars, who had faced impossible odds and found ways to win. They understood what Chun was telling them, that humanity's greatest strength had never been its technology or its weapons, but its refusal to surrender in the face of extinction. "Signal all ships," Chun ordered. "Form up on the Luna defense grid. We're going to show these alien bastards what happens when you threaten the human race." The used Defiance dropped out of hyperspace in a burst of twisted light and exotic radiation, her hull still glowing from the violent transition between dimensions. Captain Reed stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed the tactical display with the cold calculation of a predator studying its prey. The Vorthek fleet hung in space like a constellation of death, their massive dreadnoughts arranged in perfect geometric formations that spoke of military doctrine, refined over millennia. Each ship was a masterpiece of alien engineering, their hulls reflecting the light of distant stars in patterns that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. "Analysis, Commander Park?" Reed asked, his voice calm despite the impossible odds displayed on the tactical screens. 67 vessels confirmed, Captain. 12 dreadnoughts, 35 cruisers, 20 escorts. They're maintaining standard battle formation heavy units in the center, screens on the flanks. Classic Vorthek doctrine, according to the intelligence files, Reed nodded, studying the alien formation with the eye of a hunter. The Vorthek had every advantage: superior numbers, advanced technology, weapons that could disintegrate matter at the molecular level. Their shields could absorb punishment that would vaporize human vessels. Their hulls were constructed from materials that existed only in theoretical physics textbooks. But Reed had spent his entire career fighting opponents who outgunned him, outmanned him, and outclassed him in every measurable way. The border wars had taught him that victory didn't always go to the strongest or the most advanced. Sometimes it went to the most desperate, the most creative, the most willing to break every rule in the book. "They're not moving," Lieutenant Hayes observed from his position at the tactical station. "They're just waiting." Reed smiled grimly. The Vorthek were so confident in their technological superiority that they saw no need for complex maneuvers or tactical innovation. They would simply advance information, absorb whatever feeble resistance humanity could muster, and then systematically eliminate every human ship with clinical efficiency. "Signal the fleet," Reed ordered. "All units, implement Protocol 7. Park turned to stare at him, her expression a mixture of shock and admiration. Protocol 7 was barely theoretical, a desperate gambit that had been developed during the darkest days of the border wars, but never actually implemented. It violated every principle of conventional space warfare, threw away the rulebook entirely, and relied on pure human audacity to succeed. "Captain," she said carefully, "Protocol 7 has never been tested in actual combat conditions. The risks are irrelevant," Reed finished. The Vorthek expect us to fight like civilized beings. They expect formations, tactics, predictable responses. They've studied our military doctrine, analyzed our weapons, calculated our capabilities. They know exactly what we're going to do. He turned from the tactical display, his eyes blazing with the fire that had carried him through impossible missions. Which is why we're going to do something they've never seen before. Something so chaotic, so unpredictable, so fundamentally insane that their computers won't know how to respond. The human fleet began to move, breaking formation in ways that made the Vorthek tactical computers churn with confusion. Instead of the orderly battle lines the aliens expected, the human ships scattered like leaves in a hurricane, their courses apparently random and their intentions incomprehensible. They're trying to communicate, Hayes reported. Standard military frequencies. They're demanding we assume proper battle formation. Reed's laugh was sharp as a blade. Tell them we declined their generous offer. All ships, weapons free. Target their formation center and prepare for close engagement. The first wave of human ships dove toward the Vorthek fleet like meteors falling toward a planet's surface. The alien vessels responded with devastating barrages of energy weapons, their precision-controlled fire reaching out to swat the approaching ships from space with mechanical efficiency. But the humans had learned something in their centuries of warfare. That the Vorthek had never needed to master how to fight when everything was going wrong. The lead ships took horrific damage, their hulls glowing white-hot under the alien assault, but they kept coming. When their shields failed, they rerouted power to engines. When their weapons died, they became guided missiles. The Marseillais is gone, Hayes reported, his voice tight with emotion. The Yorktown is breaking up. The Stalingrad is ramming their lead dreadnought. Reed finished, watching the tactical display with professional appreciation. Direct impact. Their shields are down to 60%. The Vorthek formation began to waver as human ships tore through their carefully maintained geometry like bullets through paper. The aliens had expected a conventional engagement, a measured exchange of fire between orderly battle lines. Instead, they were facing something they had never encountered: warriors who fought with the desperate creativity of cornered animals. Second wave execute, Reed ordered. The remaining human ships charged into the chaos, their plasma weapons blazing with the fury of dying stars. The Vorthek fleet tried to adapt, their ships wheeling to present optimum firing angles, but the humans were already inside their formation, weaving between the massive alien vessels like fighters dancing around lumbering giants. "The command ship is breaking formation," Park reported. "They're trying to withdraw to a safe distance." Reed's smile was predatory. "All units, focus fire on the command vessel. Show them what human plasma weapons can do at close range." The concentrated fire of a dozen human ships converged on the Vorthek flagship, their plasma bolts tearing through shields and armor with devastating effect. The alien vessel's hull began to glow and buckle under the assault, its elegant lines distorting as superheated metal flowed like water. But the Vorthek were not helpless. Their remaining ships began to adapt to the human tactics, their formations, shifting to accommodate the chaotic nature of the engagement. They had superior firepower, advanced technology, and the cold calculation of machines. They would learn, adapt, and ultimately triumph. The real battle was just beginning. The space around Kepler Station had become a graveyard of twisted metal and exotic energies, the debris of both human and Vorthek vessels drifting in slow, eternal orbits around the dying star. Captain Reed stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, his uniform torn and bloodied from the explosion that had killed his navigation officer, watching the tactical display with the grim satisfaction of a predator that had finally cornered its prey. The Vorthek fleet had been reduced to less than half its original strength, their perfect formations shattered by 3 days of brutal, chaotic combat. But the cost had been tremendous. 60% of the human ships were gone, their crews scattered among the stars as glowing particles of superheated plasma. "Damage report," Reed ordered, his voice hoarse from breathing recycled air thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burned electronics. "Port plasma banks are offline," Commander Park reported, her left arm bound in a makeshift sling. "Shields are down to 20%. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. "We're running on emergency power and good intentions." Reed nodded grimly. The Defiance was dying around them, her hull punctured by weapons that operated on principles human science barely understood. But she was still fighting, still spitting defiance at the aliens who had come to exterminate her crew. That was what mattered, not the sophistication of their technology or the elegance of their tactics, but the simple, stubborn refusal to surrender. "What about the Vorthik?" he asked. "They're learning," Lieutenant Hayes replied from his position. "At the tactical station. Their formations are adapting to our tactics. They're using smaller units, more flexible deployments. They're starting to fight like us." Reed smiled grimly. The Vorthak had made their first critical mistake. They were trying to out-chaos humanity. But chaos wasn't a tactic to be learned or mastered. It was a fundamental aspect of human nature, forged in the crucible of evolutionary pressure and refined through millennia of warfare. "Signal all ships," Reed ordered. "Prepare for final engagement. All units, implement Protocol 0. Park turned to stare at him, her expression a mixture of shock and awe. Protocol 0 wasn't even theoretical, it was insanity codified into military doctrine, a desperate gambit that threw away everything in a single, all-or-nothing assault. "Captain," she said carefully, "Protocol 0 has a projected survival rate of 0, Reed finished. Which is why they'll never see it coming. The Vorthik think they've adapted to our tactics. They think they understand human warfare. They're wrong." The remaining human ships began to move, their courses converging on the Vorthak fleet with the inexorable certainty of gravity. But this wasn't another chaotic assault. This was something else entirely, something that violated every principle of military doctrine and basic common sense. "They're concentrating their fire," Hayes reported. "All Vorthik units are targeting our lead ships." Reed watched the tactical display with the cold satisfaction of a master strategist. The Vorthik were responding exactly as predicted, their weapon systems converging on what appeared to be a suicidal frontal assault. They had calculated the odds, analyzed the human formation, and concluded that this was humanity's final desperate gambit. They were right and completely wrong. "All ships, execute Maneuver 77 Alpha," Reed ordered. The human fleet suddenly exploded outward like an expanding sphere of death, each ship following a precisely calculated trajectory that brought them into perfect firing position around the Vorthak formation. It was a maneuver that should have been impossible, the coordination required, the timing, the sheer audacity of it all. But humans had been doing impossible things since they first looked up at the stars and decided to reach for them. The concentrated fire of the human fleet converged on the Vorthak ships from every angle simultaneously, their plasma weapons creating a devastating crossfire that overwhelmed even the aliens' advanced systems. The Vorthak fleet, caught in the perfect geometrical trap, began to come apart like a house of cards in a hurricane. "Their command ship is breaking up," Park reported, her voice filled with wonder. "The flagship is gone. They're trying to withdraw." Reed's smile was sharp as a blade. "All units, pursue and engage. Show them what happens when you underestimate the human race." The surviving Vorthak ships tried to flee, their engines glowing with the fury of dying stars as they attempted to escape the system. But the human ships followed, their plasma weapons reaching out across the vast distances of space to touch the aliens with the fire of Sol itself. One by one, the Vorthak vessels died, their hulls cracking open like eggs to spill their contents into the void. The aliens who had come to exterminate humanity were learning a lesson that countless other species had learned before them, that humans were most dangerous when they were cornered, most creative when they were desperate, and most deadly when they were fighting for their very existence. The last Vorthak ship winked out of existence in a burst of exotic radiation, its death marking the end of an empire that had considered itself superior to the crude, primitive species of the Sol system. Reed stood on the bridge of his dying ship, watching the tactical display clear of hostile contacts for the first time in days. Around him, his crew cheered and embraced, their voices raised in triumph and relief. They had done the impossible. They had defeated a technologically superior enemy through sheer, bloody-minded determination and the kind of tactical innovation that could only come from a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history learning to fight against impossible odds. But Reed knew this was only the beginning. The Galactic Council would learn of the Vorthak defeat, would see the recordings of human ships tearing apart their alien oppressors with primitive plasma weapons and crude tactics. They would realize that they had made a fundamental error in their assessment of humanity's potential. The real test was yet to come. The Vorthak homeworld hung in space like a jewel of crystalline perfection, its surface covered in geometric cities that reflected the light of twin suns in patterns of mathematical precision. Fleet Commander Deck stood on the command deck of his flagship, watching the tactical displays with growing disbelief as the human fleet approached his world's defensive perimeter. "Impossible," he whispered, his multiple eyes focusing on the sensor readings that showed barely 24 human vessels, bearing down on the most heavily defended system in the Vorthak Empire. They should all be dead. Their entire species should be extinct. The reports from the outer colonies had been fragmentary, confusing, contradictory. Ships destroyed by primitive plasma weapons. Fleets scattered by chaotic tactics that made no sense according to established military doctrine. Commanders who had served the Empire for centuries, reduced to gibbering wrecks, their carefully ordered minds shattered by encounters with human warfare. "The humans are transmitting," his communications officer reported, its voice tight with barely controlled fear. "They're demanding our unconditional surrender." Beck's laugh was harsh and bitter. The humans had somehow managed to destroy several of his fleets, but they were still primitives, still crude barbarians who relied on brute force and chaotic tactics to achieve their goals. They had won a few battles through luck and desperation, but they could never match the technological superiority of the Vorthak Empire. "Show them what real firepower looks like," he ordered. "Activate the planetary defense grid. All orbital stations, prepare to engage." The space around the Vorthak homeworld erupted in a display of destructive power that would have impressed even the Galactic Council. Massive energy weapons that could crack continents reached out across the void, their beams converging on the approaching human fleet with the precision of surgical instruments. The human ships scattered like leaves in a hurricane, their formation dissolving into apparent chaos as they attempted to evade the devastating barrage. Several vessels winked out of existence immediately, their hulls vaporized by weapons that operated on principles beyond human understanding. But the survivors kept coming, their plasma weapons blazing defiance at the forces arrayed against them. They wove between the defensive installations like fighters dancing around giants, their courses unpredictable and their intentions incomprehensible. "They're not trying to destroy our defenses," Beck realized, watching the tactical display with growing horror. "They're trying to get through them." The human fleet dove toward the planetary surface with the desperate determination of falling stars, their ships taking hideous damage but never wavering from their course. They had learned something in their brief, violent contact with the Vorthak Empire, that sometimes the best defense was a good offense, and that the most devastating attack was the one your enemy never saw coming. "All ships, prepare for surface bombardment," came the transmission from the human fleet commander. "Target military installations and government centers. Show them what human plasma weapons can do to a planet." Vec felt something he had never experienced before: pure, undiluted fear. The humans weren't trying to conquer his world or enslave his people. They were trying to demonstrate that the Vorthak Empire, for all its technological advancement and military might, was as vulnerable as any other civilization when faced with beings who fought with the desperate creativity of cornered animals. "They're barbarians," he whispered, watching the human ships dive toward his world's surface. "They're going to turn our cities into glass." But the bombardment never came. Instead, the human fleet pulled up at the last possible moment, their plasma weapons trained on the Vorthak homeworld, but holding their fire. The message was clear: they could have destroyed the planet, could have reduced millennia of Vorthak civilization to radioactive ash, but they had chosen not to. "This is Captain Reed of the UES Defiance." The transmission crackled across every frequency. "To the Vorthak Empire and the Galactic Council observers who are undoubtedly monitoring this engagement, you thought we were inferior. You thought our weapons were primitive, our tactics crude, our nature base. You were wrong." The human fleet hung in space above the Vorthak homeworld, their scarred and battle-damaged hulls testament to the price they had paid for victory. They had fought their way through the most advanced military force in the galaxy, had shattered the pride of an empire that had considered itself superior to the crude barbarians of the Sol system. "We are not your inferiors," Reed continued, his voice carrying the weight of human history across the void. "We are not primitives to be dismissed or barbarians to be exterminated. We are the children of a world that taught us to fight for everything. We achieved to never surrender in the face of impossible odds, to find ways to win when winning seemed impossible." The transmission ended, leaving the Vorthek homeworld in stunned silence. Around the planet, the defensive installations held their fire, their crews paralyzed by the demonstration of human power. The empire that had ruled through fear and technological superiority had been brought to its knees by beings they had considered barely worthy of notice. In the depths of space, the Galactic Council's monitoring stations recorded every moment of the engagement, their sensors capturing the impossible sight of human ships holding an entire world hostage with weapons the Council had dismissed as primitive. The reports would reach the Council chambers within hours, would force them to confront the reality that they had made a fundamental error in their assessment of humanity's potential. The human fleet began to withdraw, their mission complete and their message delivered. They had not come to conquer or destroy, they had come to prove a point, to demonstrate that the galaxy's assumptions about humanity were not just wrong, but dangerously naive. As the U's Defiance led her battered fleet away from the Vorthek homeworld, Captain Reed stood on his bridge and smiled. The aliens had thought they knew what humanity was capable of, had dismissed their potential based on crude weapons and primitive tactics. They had learned the hard way that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their sophistication, but their refusal to accept defeat in the face of impossible odds. The galaxy would never make that mistake again.